The forward operating base hummed with a restless energy that morning. Dust swirled along the perimeter fences, kicked up by the wind and by the constant movement of soldiers, trucks, and armored vehicles. The air was heavy with heat and tension, a combination that made every footstep feel urgent. Every radio transmission carried the weight of lives in danger. It was just past dawn, and the sun had already begun to climb, its sharp light reflecting off metal surfaces and the sweat-slicked faces of soldiers preparing for the day's operations. Among the chaos, a sharp, urgent crackle over the radio cut through the routine. Apache 3-2, come in. We've got a jammed minigun. Repeat, minigun jammed. We're under fire and need immediate support. The voice on the other end was strained, tense, each word clipped and precise, but laced with desperation. A nearby squad froze, scanning the horizon instinctively, their instincts honed by countless drills and deployments. Lieutenant Marcus King, the operations officer, spun toward the radio console. His brow furrowed, fingers flying over the controls as he tried to coordinate a solution. Copy, Apache 3-2. Hold position. Assistance en route, he said, though even he knew that time was a luxury they didn't have. Every second the minigun remained jammed could mean the difference between survival and disaster for the soldiers engaged. Below or worse, the aircraft itself. Then she stepped forward. Among the chaos, she was calm, a stark contrast to the hurried movement and frenzied voices surrounding her. Corporal Riley Quinn, known among the crew simply as Riley, carried her toolkit with an air of quiet authority. Her uniform was slightly dust-streaked, sleeves rolled to her elbows, revealing strong forearms that bore faint scars, and most intriguingly, a small seal trident tattoo partially concealed beneath the cuff. Her gaze was sharp, scanning the helicopter's position and the soldiers surrounding it. She didn't hesitate. "Let me handle it," she said in a voice that carried confidence, though not arrogance. Around her, a few soldiers exchanged glances. Many hesitated, the tension of the moment making them unsure of how to act. Some whispered among themselves female mechanics were rare, but a SEAL-trained one? That was practically unheard of. But Riley's movements betrayed no hesitation. She adjusted the strap of her toolkit, a simple gesture, yet it radiated readiness, competence, and a subtle warning. Don't get in her way. Lieutenant Kane nodded, recognizing both her skill and the necessity. Go. We'll cover you. But Riley, it's hot out there. Be careful. His tone wasn't patronizing. It carried a weight of respect, honed by years of working alongside people who had the courage to step into danger when others froze. She only nodded in acknowledgement, then turned and jogged toward the Apache, her boots crunching against the packed dirt of the forward base. The helicopter was stationed near the edge of the landing zone, rotors idling, creating a miniature whirlwind of dust and debris. Nearby, a few soldiers crouched behind sandbagged barriers, eyes scanning for potential threats as the terrain beyond the base rose and fell in jagged, rocky ridges. From a distance, the enemy could appear from any angle, making every movement outside cover risky. Yet Riley moved with purpose, her steps deliberate but swift, like a predator moving through her environment with quiet assurance. As she reached the aircraft, the pilot, Captain Eric Sandoval, was already leaning forward in the cockpit, radio headset tight over his ears. His eyes were sharp, scanning the weapon system and the surrounding area. He spotted her approaching and instinctively tensed. Something about her stance, her focus, and the tools she carried told him she wasn't a routine mechanic. Yet he didn't expect what his eyes would eventually confirm. Riley didn't pause. She dropped to one knee beside the helicopter, opening her toolkit with a practiced flick. Inside, every tool was precisely arranged, each piece in perfect order. Her hands moved automatically, selecting the correct wrench, then the alignment pins, and finally, the small calibration device used for the minigun's delicate mechanisms. Around her, the air was thick with dust, the roar of other helicopters, and distant gunfire. Each sound was background noise to her focus. She crouched low, leaning over the open gun compartment. The minigun, a complex system of interlocking barrels and high-speed rotors, lay stubbornly jammed. Riley's eyes narrowed. She traced the barrel alignment, listened to the gears with a practiced ear, and then began methodically dismantling the components, removing small pins and bolts while ensuring nothing was lost. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, every motion confident and fluid, betraying the countless hours she had spent in training that went far beyond ordinary mechanics. Flashbacks flitted through her mind, not vividly, just fragments. Nights spent in freezing waters, training courses that pushed her body to its breaking point, missions where one miscalculation could cost lives. She remembered crawling under enemy lines, disarming traps, and operating weapons she wasn't supposed to reveal to anyone. The tattoo on her forearm, partially visible as she leaned forward, was a reminder of all that she had survived, all that she had endured, and all that she could accomplish when the world depended on her. Nearby soldiers watched her, admiration mixed with disbelief. Few had ever seen anyone work under such intense pressure with such calm, and fewer still had any idea of the true scope of her capabilities. They whispered quietly, trying not to distract her, but unable to resist noticing the discipline in her every movement, the confident efficiency that radiated from her even as the world around her seemed chaotic and dangerous. Captain Sandoval, in the cockpit above, adjusted his headset and tried to maintain communication with base command. Then he noticed the glint of the seal trident on her forearm. Recognition hit instantly, sharp and sudden. His hands froze on the controls, his mind racing. He knew the symbol, the reputation, the history. He knew the level of skill, danger, and precision associated with it. And he realized, in that moment, that the person fixing his minigun under fire was no ordinary mechanic. She was a warrior, a SEAL, and she had deliberately kept her identity subtle, hidden beneath the surface, until the right moment revealed it. Time slowed around him. The world of rotor blades, dust, and distant explosions faded into the background as his attention focused entirely on her. She didn't notice the momentary pause in the pilot above, her focus unwavering on the jammed weapon. Yet their eyes met briefly through the cockpit glass, a silent exchange of recognition and respect passing between them. He knew instinctively that the weapon, and possibly the entire mission, was in capable hands. Riley's hands never faltered. Every screw, every pin, every alignment check was executed flawlessly. Sparks flickered briefly as metal slid back into place, and the tension in the air seemed to tighten around her. Soldiers crouched nearby, weapons at the ready, hearts pounding in anticipation. The difference between success and failure hung in the balance, and yet Riley moved with serene confidence, unaffected by the danger or the weight of the moment. Finally, she stepped back, wiping a streak of sweat from her forehead. She gave a subtle nod upward, signaling that the minigun was operational. The roar of the Apache's weapon system came to life, the barrels spinning with precision and power. Enemy fire immediately faltered under the sudden return of overwhelming force, giving cover to the soldiers below and securing the helicopter's mission. Relief and awe rippled through everyone watching, though Riley remained calm, almost serene, as if this were simply another day at work. Captain Sandoval exhaled slowly, his hands steady now on the controls, but his eyes lingered on her forearm, on the tattoo, and on the warrior before him. He knew, in that instant, that he had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a mechanical repair, but a demonstration of courage, skill, and calm under fire that few could ever comprehend. The world might never know her full story, But here, in this chaotic corner of a forward operating base, she had left a mark. And that mark was unmistakable. The landing zone was a whirlwind of chaos. Dust whipped across the rough terrain, filling eyes and clinging to sweat-soaked uniforms. Helicopters hovered nearby, their rotors kicking up clouds of dirt and gravel. The distant rumble of artillery punctuated the low hum of the Apache's engines, mingling with the crack of gunfire from enemy positions not far beyond the base perimeter. The air itself seemed to vibrate with urgency, and every sound carried a weight heavier than normal, the weight of lives teetering on the edge of disaster. Riley approached the Apache with purpose, toolkit clutched in her hands like an extension of her own body. Her boots crunched against the dirt, the sound almost swallowed by the roar of the rotors, yet deliberate, measured. She kept her head low, scanning the surrounding area with trained precision, aware that danger could come from any direction. Every soldier knew the risks, but few had seen someone move through such a chaotic scene with the level of calm and control Riley displayed. She crouched beside the Apache, opening her toolkit with an almost ritualistic precision. Every wrench, pin, and alignment tool had its place. Her hands moved over them like dancers' fingers across a piano, selecting what was needed without hesitation. Around her, the soldiers kept their distance, some taking cover behind sandbags, others peering through scopes toward the ridgelines, where enemy combatants could emerge at any moment. Riley didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that hesitation could kill not just her, but everyone counting on her. Captain Sandoval hovered in the cockpit, eyeing her approach with a mixture of curiosity and concern. He had flown with countless mechanics before, but Riley was different. Her reputation preceded her, though few outside the inner circles of the military knew the full extent. Something about the way she moved, the confidence in her stance, and the precision in her hands told him she was no ordinary support crew. He couldn't take his eyes off her, even as he monitored the surrounding threats. The Apache's minigun sat stubbornly jammed, an intricate web of barrels, rotors, and electronic sensors frozen mid-operation. Riley knelt beside it, taking a deep breath, her eyes scanning every connection, every gear, every mechanism. She listened for the subtle clues that would tell her where the problem lay. A faint click here, a misaligned pin there, each tiny detail mattered. Around her, the wind and the roar of the rotors tugged at her uniform, but she remained unmoved. Flashbacks drifted through her mind, fragments of past missions, training exercises, and combat scenarios. Nights spent submerged in freezing waters, crawling through mud under simulated enemy fire, disarming traps, and navigating terrain that would have killed a less prepared soldier. Each memory was a reminder of her resilience and the rigorous discipline instilled in her through years of Navy SEAL training. The tattoo on her forearm, partially visible as her sleeve shifted, wasn't just ink, it was a symbol of her past, a quiet testament to the lives she had saved and the danger she had faced. Her hands worked with fluid precision, removing bolts and aligning components, her movements a seamless combination of knowledge and instinct. Sparks occasionally flickered from the metal, reflecting off her eyes as she concentrated on the mechanism. Soldiers nearby whispered among themselves, barely daring to breathe, impressed by the combination of skill and calm she radiated. The Apache was a lifeline for the soldiers below, and Riley's ability to restore its weapon under fire was nothing short of miraculous. "Watch that ridge!" A nearby gunner shouted, breaking the momentary hush of anticipation. Bullets kicked up dirt near Riley's feet, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes remained locked on the jammed mechanism, fingers adjusting, turning, aligning. Each movement was precise, almost surgical, a dance of metal and muscle. She had trained for chaos like this. Adrenaline, noise, and pressure sharpened her focus rather than breaking it. Captain Sandoval finally spoke into the headset, his voice steady despite the tension. "Status, Quinn. Can you fix it?" Riley didn't look up. "Almost there. Just a few more adjustments," she replied, her tone calm, deliberate, unwavering. There was no doubt in her voice, and that quiet confidence spread to those around her. Soldiers straightened, feeling the anchor of her assurance in the storm of the hot zone. The enemy fire continued, sporadic but dangerously close. Riley leaned over the minigun, her body tense but controlled. She located a misaligned rotor shaft, the root of the jam, and carefully reinserted it into position. Her hands moved quickly, but cautiously, aware that a single mistake could damage the weapon permanently, or worse, put lives in immediate danger. Sweat dripped down her forehead, but she ignored it, her focus absolute. From above, Captain Sandoval adjusted the throttle, keeping the Apache steady, but his gaze kept returning to her forearm. The faint glint of the SEAL trident caught the sunlight, and recognition struck him instantly. A SEAL here, in this hot zone, fixing his weapon under fire. His mind raced, processing what he had seen, the skill she displayed, the calm under chaos. This wasn't just a mechanic. This was a warrior, someone who had been forged in trials few could comprehend. The soldiers around her seemed to sense it too, even if they didn't know the full story. Whispers circulated someone with that kind of skill, that level of focus under fire, had to be exceptional. They watched as she adjusted the final alignment, testing the mechanism with her hands before stepping back slightly. The tension around the helicopter seemed to shift, almost palpable, as though the very air acknowledged that the weapon was no longer compromised. With one last careful motion, Riley tightened the final bolt, secured the alignment, and pressed the minigun's reset mechanism. The barrel spun to life with a roar, and the Apache's guns erupted, suppressing enemy positions instantly. A cheer went up from the soldiers, though Riley barely acknowledged it. She remained crouched, vigilant, scanning the area as though expecting the next challenge to appear at any moment. Captain Sandoval finally exhaled, his hands relaxing on the controls. His eyes, however, never left her. The pilot realized he had just witnessed more than a repair. He had watched a master at work under impossible conditions. He couldn't shake the awe that accompanied seeing the SEAL insignia, even partially revealed, on the arms of someone he had initially assumed was a support mechanic. In that split second, he understood that the balance of life and death in the mission had rested on her hands, and she had not faltered. Riley finally stood, brushing dirt from her uniform, her eyes scanning the horizon for further threats. The soldiers nearby began to move forward cautiously, emboldened by her skill, her calm, and the sudden restoration of the Apache's weapon. Yet Riley remained watchful, aware that the hot zone had not yet yielded all its danger. Every sense was alive, the smell of dust, the distant crackle of fire, the vibration of the helicopter beneath her. She was ready for the next moment, whatever it might bring. In the brief silence after the roar of the gunfire, there was an unspoken recognition between the soldiers, the pilot, and Riley. They had seen someone extraordinary. Not just a mechanic, not just a soldier, but a combination of courage, skill, and precision rarely witnessed in the field. And though Riley's SEAL past remained mostly hidden, even the faint hint of the tattoo on her forearm had been enough to communicate a story of resilience, danger, and capability that words could never fully convey. The hot zone continued, but the Apache was ready. The soldiers had regained a measure of confidence, inspired by Riley's actions, and Captain Sandoval knew, without a doubt, that this mission had been saved by her. As the wind whipped through the landing zone and dust swirled around her, Riley crouched once more, tools ready, eyes sharp, and heart steady. She had faced the chaos head-on, and as always, she had emerged unshaken. The Apache's barrels cooled as Riley leaned further into the open compartment, her tools moving with a rhythm that was part instinct, part discipline. The chaotic noise of the landing zone pressed in on all sides, the pop of small arms fire, the constant thrum of rotor blades, the crackle of radios passing hurried orders. Yet inside her mind, there was only clarity. She had learned long ago to separate sound from focus, to allow the noise to sharpen her rather than scatter her thoughts. Every turn of her wrist, every tightening of a bolt, carried the weight of experience measured not in hours of practice, but in years of survival. There were mechanics on the base, good ones, but none who carried the memory of crawling through a flooded tunnel with 50 pounds of gear on her back, lungs burning for air. None who had been dropped into pitch-black water at night and told to swim 2 miles to shore without being detected. None who had memorized the sound of weapons misfiring in the dark, who could diagnose a jam by touch alone while bullets cracked overhead. She had done all that and more. The SEAL program had forged her into something beyond ordinary. Few knew she had made it through. Fewer still knew what it had cost. Riley didn't think about the pain anymore, the endless running, the drowning sensations during drown-proofing, the sand ground into every open wound, the bell she had refused to ring, no matter how much her body screamed at her to quit. She thought instead about the lessons: discipline, focus, adaptability, a will sharper than steel. And now, kneeling in the dust beneath the Apache, those lessons guided her hands. Her sleeve shifted as she leaned forward to access a particularly stubborn alignment bracket. The edge of a tattoo caught the light, small but unmistakable to anyone who knew what it meant: the gold seal trident. It wasn't flashy or bold. She had placed it where only fragments of it showed when her uniform slipped, because she had no desire to flaunt it. The tattoo wasn't for others. It was for her, a reminder of who she was and what she had endured. The soldiers crouched nearby didn't notice. Their eyes were on the ridges, their nerves frayed by the risk of incoming fire. To them, she was just Riley, the base's unshakable mechanic, the woman who could coax life out of even the most battered machinery. They had seen her crawl into engine bays, patch hydraulic lines under fire, and improvise fixes with nothing more than wire and sheer stubbornness. They respected her skill, though they didn't know the half of it. But Captain Eric Sandoval noticed. From the cockpit above, he had an angle no one else did. His eyes scanned the compartment she was working in, and for a moment, they caught the faint outline of the tattoo. At first, his brain refused to register it. Then recognition snapped into place like a trap closing. The SEAL trident. He froze, breath hitching in his chest. He had seen it before, worn proudly by some of the most legendary warriors in the military. Men who had pulled off impossible rescues, who had fought battles in the shadows the world would never know. Men whose very presence carried an aura of danger and respect. But here now, it was inked on the arm of a woman crouched in the dust, hands buried in the guts of his helicopter's minigun. He blinked hard, trying to reconcile the image. He had heard whispers, of course. Rumors about a woman who had slipped through the SEAL program, who had passed the same crucible men had broken under. Officially, the military never confirmed such stories. Officially, no record existed. But Sandoval had been in the service long enough to know that unofficial truths often lived in the shadows, carried by those who preferred action to recognition. And now, one of those truths was kneeling below him. His grip tightened on the cyclic, though the helicopter hovered steady. For a moment, he forgot the gunfire, the dust, the chaos. His eyes locked on the tattoo, then on her face, calm and focused as she adjusted another bolt. She hadn't noticed him staring, hadn't flinched under fire. The sheer calm of her movements underlined what the tattoo already told him. She was more than she appeared. Down below, Riley shifted her weight, tightening another bracket. The memory of training came back unbidden, the way her instructors had shouted during Hell Week. the way the surf had dragged her under until she thought her lungs would burst, the endless miles of running with boats strapped to her shoulders. She remembered the night missions, the silent insertions, the feeling of water closing around her as she swam beneath the cover of darkness. All of it burned into her muscle memory, carried now in her hands as she coaxed the minigun back to life. Her tools clicked into place with smooth precision. She tugged at the alignment, tested the barrel rotation by hand, then recalibrated the feed system. It wasn't just mechanics, it was intuition born of combat experience, of knowing how weapons behaved when pushed to their limits. She wasn't just fixing a jam. She was ensuring the gun would fire true when soldiers' lives depended on it. Sandoval swallowed hard. He wanted to ask questions, wanted to call down to her, to confirm what his eyes had told him. But something in her posture held him back. She didn't want attention. The tattoo wasn't displayed as a badge of honor. It was quiet, almost hidden. She was here to work, to save the mission, not to answer questions. He respected that instinctively, yet he couldn't shake the awe curling in his chest. Enemy movement. A soldier shouted, snapping the moment back into urgency. Gunfire rattled in the distance, echoing through the valley. Riley didn't so much as glance up. Her fingers twisted the final bolt into place, her jaw set, her mind focused. Her heart didn't race, it slowed, settling into the calm rhythm she had cultivated through years of training. She wiped a streak of sweat from her brow, leaving a smudge of dust across her temple, and muttered under her breath, "Not today." Then, with one final adjustment, she set the barrels to spin. The mechanism whirred, smooth and alive again, the gun's power restored. The soldiers nearby exhaled collectively, relief washing over them. Sandoval felt his chest loosen as well, though his eyes never left her arm. The tattoo, the trident, the truth that she carried something far beyond what any of them had realized. Riley didn't notice the whispers behind her. She didn't see the wide-eyed look Sandoval shot toward the insignia on her forearm. She only knew that the gun was ready, that the Apache could fight again, and that the men on the ground had a chance to make it home. That was all that mattered. But the pilot's frozen moment of recognition, a silent jolt of awe and disbelief, would linger long after the dust settled. Captain Eric Sandoval hovered in the cockpit of the Apache, the rotor blades chopping the air with a deafening rhythm that seemed to pulse in sync with his heartbeat. He had flown countless missions over hostile territory, faced ambushes, and navigated hostile fire while making split-second life-or-death decisions. He was experienced, disciplined, and steady under pressure, but nothing in his years of service had prepared him for this. The woman crouched below, fixing his jammed minigun and the faint but unmistakable glint of a seal trident tattoo on her forearm. His hands froze on the cyclic mid-adjustment as the image registered in his mind. Recognition hit like a punch to the gut. That symbol, the seal trident, was not just a tattoo. It was a declaration. It meant elite training, combat experience, and a level of skill and danger that most soldiers could only dream about. To see it on Riley's arm, partially hidden beneath her rolled-up sleeve, was both shocking and awe-inspiring. He blinked rapidly, trying to process what he was seeing. The world around him, the roar of the rotors, the scattered gunfire, the dust swirling around the landing zone faded into background noise as his mind locked onto the realization. Riley wasn't just the base's quiet mechanic. She was a combat-hardened SEAL, someone who had been forged in some of the most brutal training imaginable, and who now operated under fire with the calm precision of a seasoned warrior. Sandoval's chest tightened. He had heard stories about women in the SEAL program, whispered legends, rumors that seemed almost impossible. Officially, the military made no record of such feats. It was a world defined by secrecy and silent excellence. But here she was, crouched in the dust, repairing his aircraft's weapon under conditions that would unsettle even the most experienced soldiers. The fact that she had passed through that crucible, that she had survived missions most men would fail, was suddenly undeniable. The pilot's mind raced. He recalled the small details he had seen during training briefings and classified mission reports, the meticulous precision, the calm under pressure, the ability to operate with lethal efficiency. Those traits now revealed themselves in Riley's every motion. Fingers twisting bolts, adjusting alignments, and testing the mechanism with a measured patience that only someone who had lived through true combat could possess. He couldn't move. Not because he was afraid, but because the moment demanded recognition, a suspended instant in which he understood the scale of what he was witnessing. The Apache hovered over a battlefield, bullets snapping into the dirt around her, dust and debris clinging to her uniform. And yet her hands never wavered. The gun roared to life under her touch, the mechanism coming alive like an extension of her own body. Sandoval leaned closer to the cockpit glass, eyes scanning every motion. He noticed the faint twitch of her jaw, the set of her shoulders, the way she adjusted her footing as the ground beneath her vibrated with the hum of the Apache's engines. Every movement radiated confidence, control, and deadly efficiency. For a fleeting moment, he felt exposed, acutely aware that the balance of life and death for everyone in the hot zone rested in hands that bore the mark of one of the most elite combat forces in the world. His gaze returned to the tattoo, that glinting trident on her forearm. Recognition had evolved into awe. That symbol carried weight beyond words. It represented resilience, courage, and skill that most people could only imagine. Sandoval realized in that instant that Riley had faced circumstances far more dangerous than anything he had ever encountered. She had survived and thrived, and now, under the fire of real combat, she was demonstrating that same lethal competence. Around him, the battlefield pressed in. Enemy fire continued, sporadic but threatening, kicking up dust and forcing soldiers to keep low behind sandbags. But the pilot felt a strange calm in the midst of the chaos, an almost reverential silence in his mind as he watched her work. It was as if the world had narrowed to a single point of clarity: Riley and the minigun, a combination of skill and instinct that defied conventional understanding. He swallowed hard. His fingers itched to reach for the radio, to speak, to call her name, but he knew better. There was no need. She didn't need instructions. She was in her element, every movement an execution of experience and instinct, honed by countless trials. To intervene would be both unnecessary and disruptive. Sandoval's role in this moment was observation, recognition, and respect. Riley's focus remained unbroken. Her hands tightened the final alignment, tested the barrel rotation by hand, and engaged the feed system. Sparks flickered briefly as metal shifted into place, a small but crucial detail in the machinery coming alive. She breathed steadily, unhurried, even as bullets kicked up around her, and the world seemed to teeter on the edge of chaos. The tattoo on her forearm caught the sunlight again, subtle but powerful, a signal of her history and capability. Sandoval's mind briefly wandered to what she must have endured to reach this point. Hell Week, the grueling physical and mental trials of SEAL training, missions in hostile territories, and the kind of endurance that forged warriors from ordinary men and women into something almost mythic. That same endurance now manifested in her hands, working on a complex weapon system under conditions that would paralyze anyone else. He couldn't look away. A sense of mutual recognition passed between them, though unspoken and silent. He understood her skill. She understood his observation. Neither moved, yet a shared understanding hung in the air. In that fleeting moment, both realized something profound. Each of them had recognized the other's competence, experience, and capacity to handle extreme danger. It was a connection forged in the unspoken language of combat, where actions spoke louder than words, and trust was implicit in performance. The helicopter's engines droned on, the battlefield a chaotic blur of motion. Yet Sandoval remained rooted in awe. The pilot knew that no one else could grasp the full extent of Riley's abilities. Few would even recognize the tattoo, and fewer still could comprehend its meaning. But he did, and that knowledge made him see the mission and everyone involved in an entirely new light. Finally, Riley tightened the last bolt, adjusted the feed mechanism one final time, and allowed the barrels to spin. The minigun came alive, the roar of its mechanism filling the air, asserting dominance over the battlefield. Enemy fire faltered, as the weapon's renewed power created a protective zone for the soldiers below. Relief and astonishment rippled through the landing zone, but Riley remained calm, vigilant, every sense alert to the next potential threat. Sandoval exhaled slowly, his hands relaxing on the cyclic, but his eyes never left her. The tattoo, the precision, the calm under fire it all spoke to a lifetime of training, trials and survival that he had glimpsed in these few minutes. In that suspended moment, he understood that the balance of life and death had rested on her hands, and she had delivered. As Riley straightened, brushing dirt from her uniform, and returning her tools to the kit, Sandoval allowed himself a faint nod of respect. He knew he would never forget this moment, the sight of her at work, the revelation of the seal trident, and the undeniable proof of her extraordinary skill. For a fraction of a second, the chaos of the hot zone faded, leaving only recognition, respect, and the silent acknowledgement of a warrior at work. Sandoval knew, without a doubt, that Riley Quinn was someone exceptional, someone whose quiet presence could shift the balance of any mission. And though the battle continued around them, that moment would linger in his memory, a reminder that true skill often hides beneath calm, that true courage sometimes moves silently, and that some warriors reveal themselves only when the world demands it most. The battlefield seemed to hold its breath. The roar of the Apache's rotors mixed with sporadic enemy fire, the dust swirling like a storm around the landing zone. Yet, amid the chaos, a strange calm prevailed between Riley Quinn and Captain Eric Sandoval. They were two professionals, each recognizing the other's skill without a single word. The world outside the danger, the noise, the unpredictability had shrunk into a narrow tunnel of focus, one where each understood that the other could handle whatever came next. Riley straightened, tools returned to her kit with precise care, her forearm brushing against her gear, subtly revealing the glint of the seal trident tattoo. She paused briefly, scanning the terrain with eyes trained to detect danger, noting the ridges, the sparse cover, and the faint movement along the distant ridgeline. Every movement carried purpose. Nothing was wasted, nothing overlooked. Sandoval watched, heart still pounding slightly from the shock of recognition. The woman before him wasn't just a mechanic. She was a warrior forged in the crucible of SEAL training. He had seen combat specialists before, but Riley exuded something different, an unshakable calm born of real experience. She didn't just survive danger. She commanded it, mastering chaos as naturally as a seasoned pilot handled the helicopter's controls. Their eyes met briefly through the cockpit glass. No words were spoken, yet the connection was undeniable. Sandoval's gaze lingered on her, reading her posture, the set of her jaw, the way her fingers flexed near the toolkit, ready for the next adjustment. He realized instinctively that Riley not only understood the battlefield, she had shaped it in her mind before stepping foot into it. That understanding created a silent bond between them. He trusted her instinctively, and she trusted his judgment as the pilot controlling the firepower of the aircraft hovering just above. Riley crouched again to check the minigun's calibration, adjusting feed lines with a delicate precision. Bullets cracked in the distance, hitting near the base of the ridgeline and ricocheting off rocks, but she didn't flinch. Her calmness wasn't ignorance, it was control. She could feel the rhythm of the battlefield, anticipate the enemy's movement, and position herself optimally to respond to threats. Every soldier nearby felt it, even if they couldn't articulate why. She exuded confidence that made fear seem almost optional. Sandoval's respect deepened with each movement. He had flown countless missions and witnessed heroes in action, but Riley's quiet, methodical courage struck a different chord. Her SEAL training wasn't just a credential. It was visible in every subtle motion, the way she checked gear, the rhythm of her adjustments, the unwavering focus despite the chaos around her. Her tattoo, the trident, wasn't just ink. It was a signature of excellence, an emblem of the extraordinary skills she carried quietly, without fanfare. He made a subtle adjustment in the helicopter's position, hovering slightly lower to give her better access to the maintenance panel. It was a gesture that could have seemed mundane, but in the current tension, it was significant, a silent acknowledgement of trust. Riley glanced up just briefly, noting his movement, then returned to her work. No words were exchanged, yet each understood the other's intentions completely. Sandoval realized this was rare, the kind of silent communication forged between seasoned professionals who could operate in life-and-death situations without verbal instruction. The enemy, meanwhile, had begun to respond to the renewed threat posed by the Apache. Sporadic fire raked the ridges, kicking up dust and rock fragments, forcing the soldiers below to press low into cover. Riley's eyes flicked toward the flashes of gunfire. She evaluated trajectories and calculated angles instinctively, her mind running through scenarios faster than any ordinary soldier could comprehend. She wasn't just repairing a weapon. She was preparing a battlefield, using the Apache as an extension of her will, guiding firepower to where it was most effective. Sandoval felt it in the air, the tension, the unspoken recognition, the mutual respect. He wasn't just witnessing her skill. He was part of a coordinated dance between pilot and operator, even though it was largely silent. Their instincts were aligned. He understood how she would react, and she anticipated how he would adjust the aircraft's positioning. That synergy was invisible to everyone else, but vital to the survival of the mission and the soldiers on the ground. Riley adjusted the feed system again, checking the alignment of the barrels. The Apache's minigun spun freely now, firing a test burst into the designated safe zone. The sound was deafening, a mechanical growl that seemed to shake the dust from the air. She stood and wiped her hands, eyes scanning for the next point of attention, ready for any malfunction, any obstacle, any unexpected threat. Her calmness under fire radiated outward, instilling confidence in the soldiers nearby. The pilot could feel the change immediately. Soldiers who had been tense moments ago now held themselves taller, their movements deliberate, their focus sharpened. Riley's presence, her skill, her silent command of the situation was contagious. Even Sandoval himself felt steadier, more confident, as though her calm aura had woven into the chaotic energy of the battlefield. Sandoval finally allowed himself a breath, though he kept his focus tight on the aircraft's controls. He realized that few would recognize the full significance of what they were witnessing. The SEAL trident, the skill, the calm, all of it would appear routine to outsiders. But he knew better. The woman below was a living legend, moving with precision that only the elite could achieve. Riley crouched again, performing a final check on the minigun's cooling system and alignment. Her hands moved quickly, yet carefully, adjusting components with the smoothness of instinct honed by years of combat. Every tool in motion was deliberate, purposeful. Sandoval noted how her body language conveyed both vigilance and confidence. She was ready to react instant threats, yet unflustered, grounded in her training. The connection between them strengthened, silent and undeniable. Each understood the other's capabilities without needing words. Sandoval could feel it in the aircraft's response. Riley could sense it in the rhythm of the battlefield. The unspoken communication was fluid precise, and life-saving. Finally, Riley stepped back, brushing dust from her sleeves, signaling the Apache's minigun was ready. The helicopter roared back to life, its gun systems firing into the ridges with deadly efficiency. Enemy positions faltered under the onslaught, retreating as the combined presence of pilot and operator shifted the balance of the battlefield. The soldiers below moved with renewed confidence, inspired by the mastery and calm displayed before them. Sandoval exhaled fully, a mixture of relief and awe coursing through him. His eyes never left her as she collected her tools, readying herself for whatever came next. Riley had not only repaired a critical weapon, but had demonstrated her strategic brilliance, her calm under fire, and the lethal efficiency of a SEAL operative. She had turned chaos into control with silent authority. In that brief moment, a profound recognition solidified between them, a shared understanding that each could rely on the other implicitly. Words were unnecessary. Trust was implicit. Survival, efficiency, and tactical mastery were guaranteed because both knew they could handle anything the battlefield presented. And the soldiers, observing from a distance, felt it too, the intangible aura of someone who was beyond ordinary, someone who had faced and mastered unimaginable danger. Riley Quinn was no longer just a mechanic. She was a warrior, a leader, a silent force capable of shifting the tide of battle with nothing more than skill, instinct, and quiet authority. The Apache's engines hummed steadily, the minigun primed and ready. Riley's eyes swept the horizon, calculating, anticipating, poised for action. And above her, Sandoval maintained position, aware that he was no longer merely the pilot. He was part of a partnership forged in chaos, mutual respect, and recognition of extraordinary skill. In the storm of gunfire, dust, and rotors, a silent alliance had formed, unspoken but unbreakable, a bond between two professionals who had recognized greatness in one another in the briefest of moments. The dust hung thick in the air, a hazy curtain that blurred the line between friend and foe. Sporadic gunfire erupted from the ridges, small arms rattling against the dry rocks, bullets spitting sparks as they collided with metal and earth. The roar of the Apache's rotors shook the ground beneath Riley's boots as she crouched low beside the helicopter. Sweat streaked her face, mixed with the grime and grit of the hot zone, but she didn't flinch. Her focus was absolute. The minigun lay open before her, its barrel still locked mid-cycle, a stubborn jam preventing it from firing. Lives depended on its return to action, and she felt the weight of responsibility without letting it paralyze her. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, twisting bolts, aligning gears, and checking the calibration of the feed mechanism. Every click and turn was a measured decision, born from years of experience that went far beyond mechanical training. It was combat instinct in motion. Above her, Captain Eric Sandoval hovered the Apache with meticulous care, adjusting the rotors to maintain a stable hover despite the gusting wind and dust. His eyes never left Riley. He had long since recognized the SEAL trident on her forearm, and the revelation of her elite training only intensified his awe. He understood now why her hands moved with such absolute confidence. She wasn't simply repairing a machine. She was taking control of the battlefield through the precision of her skill. "Watch the left ridge," a nearby soldier shouted, ducking behind a sandbag as bullets ricocheted off rocks near his position. Riley's eyes flicked briefly in the direction of the warning, assessing angles, cover, and potential trajectories. Her body language remained calm, her breathing steady, as if she were merely performing a routine adjustment in a workshop rather than battling a hostile engagement. The subtle shift of her weight, the readiness in her posture, spoke of someone who had survived impossible odds countless times before. She returned her attention to the minigun, sliding the final barrel into alignment and checking the rotation manually. Sparks flickered as metal components machinered, but her hands never hesitated. Years of SEAL training had conditioned her to operate in extreme conditions. Fear, chaos, and exhaustion were just variables to be managed. She could feel the tension in the air, the danger lurking in the rocks beyond, yet her calm was absolute. Every motion was deliberate, every decision executed without hesitation. Sandoval's admiration deepened as he watched. Few mechanics had ever approached such precision under fire, and fewer still had the presence of mind to evaluate threats while performing delicate adjustments. Riley's combination of mechanical expertise and combat instinct made her exceptional. He realized that her actions had not only restored the weapon, but had effectively turned the tide for the soldiers on the ground. The enemy fire faltered, uncertain in the face of a machine now primed to respond. Riley's hands moved fluidly, the rhythm almost hypnotic, each adjustment perfectly timed. She tested the feed system, ensuring the ammunition loaded smoothly, and rotated the barrels manually once more to verify alignment. A small misalignment could have catastrophic consequences. Barrels could seize mid-operation or jam again at a critical moment, but Riley anticipated every variable. Her training as a SEAL had taught her to operate under pressure, to predict mechanical and tactical outcomes simultaneously. The soldiers crouched nearby, watched with bated breath. Some whispered in awe, recognizing that this was no ordinary repair. Others remained silent, too focused on survival to comment, but all felt the gravity of the moment. Riley's calmness, her precision, and her unspoken command of the situation inspired confidence. The entire hot zone seemed to respond to her presence. Fear was replaced with focus, hesitation with action. Sandoval adjusted the Apache slightly, moving it closer to the hot zone to provide better support while remaining safe from enemy fire. His voice came over the headset, steady and clear. "Status, Quinn. How much longer?" Riley didn't look up. "Almost there," she said, her tone calm and unshakable, almost casual despite the storm of gunfire around her. Just a few final adjustments. The enemy fire intensified, but Riley didn't falter. She recalibrated the weapon's firing mechanism, checking the alignment of the barrels one last time. The rotation was smooth, the feed system perfect, the weapon ready. She pressed the reset button, and the minigun roared to life, spinning with a mechanical growl that echoed across the hot zone. The sound was deafening, a testament to her success and a warning to those who opposed them. The Apache immediately unleashed controlled bursts, the minigun slicing through enemy positions with devastating accuracy. Sandoval maneuvered the aircraft with precision, coordinating with Riley instinctively, responding to her subtle signals and timing. It was a synergy born of respect, skill, and a silent understanding of each other's abilities. Together, they turned the tide, providing cover for the soldiers below and forcing the enemy to scatter. Riley stood, brushing dust and sweat from her uniform, her eyes sweeping the area for new threats. She was alert but unflustered, every sense tuned to the environment. The minigun's roar now provided a shield for the troops on the ground, the combination of aircraft and operator creating a protective corridor through the battlefield. The soldiers moved with renewed confidence, emboldened by her mastery of the situation. Sandoval couldn't take his eyes off her. The tattoo on her forearm gleamed faintly in the sunlight, a symbol of the skill and training that had made this rescue possible. He realized the full extent of what she had just accomplished. Not only had she repaired a critical weapon under extreme conditions, but she had also restored morale, provided tactical advantage, and demonstrated a mastery of both mechanics and battlefield awareness that few could match. Riley's mind remained sharp, processing the battlefield with precision. She anticipated enemy movements, calculated angles for the minigun's coverage, and ensured that every action maximized efficiency while minimizing risk. Her SEAL training had made her instinctive, capable of seeing the battlefield in layers, predicting outcomes, and taking preemptive action without hesitation. She was not just a mechanic. She was a strategist, a warrior, and a savior for those in the hot zone. The soldiers around her whispered in awe. They had seen mechanics before, and they had seen warriors before, but rarely both in one person. Riley's quiet competence and lethal precision became the anchor of the battlefield. Her presence reassured them, inspired them, and reminded them that even in chaos, there were individuals who could command order through skill alone. Sandoval allowed himself a rare moment of admiration. Few had the discipline, courage, and skill to operate in such extreme conditions with such calm. Riley's actions transcended mechanical repair. It was combat artistry, a dance of instinct, precision, and focus under fire. He realized that the balance of life and death for everyone in the hot zone had rested in her hands, and she had delivered flawlessly. As the Apache continued its suppressive fire, Riley crouched again to monitor the weapon's heat and rotation, making micro-adjustments to ensure sustained operation. Her movements were subtle but vital, demonstrating her awareness of both the mechanics and the surrounding threats. Sandoval knew that she could have been anywhere in the world, yet she had chosen to be here, protecting lives in silence and under immense pressure. The battle's intensity gradually began to wane. Enemy fire slackened under the precise and overwhelming return of fire from the Apache's minigun. Soldiers cautiously advanced, inspired by Riley's calm courage and the restored firepower above. The hot zone, once tense and chaotic, was now held firmly, thanks to her skill, focus, and unwavering determination. Finally, Riley stood tall, brushing her sleeves and straightening her uniform. Her eyes swept the battlefield one last time, checking for threats, calculating contingencies, and ensuring that the soldiers and aircraft remained safe. She collected her tools and returned them to the kit with the same precision she had shown throughout. There was no fanfare, no dramatic gesture. She had accomplished the mission, restored the weapon, and turned the tide of battle. For her, that was enough. Sandoval exhaled, his hands relaxing on the cyclic, yet his gaze remained fixed on her. A pilot had seen many skilled soldiers, but Riley Quinn was exceptional calm under fire, supremely competent, and entirely unshakable. The combination of her SEAL training, battlefield instinct, and mechanical skill had made the difference between chaos and control, between failure and survival. Around her, soldiers moved cautiously forward, their confidence renewed. They had witnessed mastery, under fire, and realized that the calm, skilled woman crouched beside the Apache had saved lives in ways they could only admire silently. Riley had not sought recognition. She had not flaunted her skill or her tattoo. She had simply done what needed to be done, and done it perfectly. The roar of the minigun subsided as the aircraft maintained its patrol, the battlefield slowly returning to a tense but controlled state. Riley's presence had shifted the balance, not through force of ego, but through precision, courage, and relentless focus. She had restored the weapon, protected the soldiers, and reminded everyone that true heroes often worked quietly, revealing their greatness only when the moment demanded it. The battlefield had quieted, though the air remained heavy with dust and tension. Spent cartridges littered the ground. The jagged ridges still smoldered with the distant heat of gunfire, and soldiers moved cautiously forward, scanning for any remaining threats. The roar of the Apache's rotors, now steady in patrol mode, had become a background rhythm, a constant reminder of power and protection above. Riley Quinn stood near the aircraft, tools returned to her kit, sweat and dust streaking her face. She exuded calm authority, the embodiment of discipline and focus, even as adrenaline still thrummed through her veins. Captain Eric Sandoval hovered in the cockpit, eyes still locked on her. The SEAL trident tattoo on her forearm had revealed a truth he hadn't fully grasped until now. Riley was not just skilled. She was exceptional, forged through trials few could survive, and tested in ways most soldiers could only imagine. He had witnessed her precision, her calm, her mastery under fire, and now, in the aftermath, he felt compelled to bridge the silent gap that had formed between them during the battle. He landed the Apache nearby, the dust kicking up around him as the rotors slowed. Soldiers glanced curiously, some raising eyebrows at the unusual interaction. Sandoval opened the cockpit door, stepping down onto the uneven ground. His eyes remained fixed on Riley, whose posture was relaxed but alert, ready to respond to any sudden threat, as always. He walked toward her deliberately, each step measured. "Corporal Quinn," he called out over the lingering hum of the rotors. She glanced up briefly, her sharp eyes meeting his. "Captain," she acknowledged simply, her voice calm, almost detached, though carrying an undercurrent of controlled energy that spoke of readiness. Sandoval stopped a few feet away, studying her as she adjusted the strap on her toolkit. "I need to be honest," he began, his tone serious, yet tinged with awe. "I've seen a lot of mechanics, a lot of soldiers. But what you just did, I've never seen anything like it. And that tattoo?" He gestured subtly toward her forearm. "I didn't know." Riley's eyes flickered momentarily toward her trident before returning to Sandoval. She didn't explain immediately. Her calm had not wavered, but the air between them shifted slightly. The pilot's recognition was validating, yes, but also intrusive. He had glimpsed a side of her life meant to remain largely hidden. Only those who had earned her trust knew the depths of her experience, and this moment required delicate navigation. "I've handled worse than this," she said finally, her tone even, almost understated. "This was just another jam. One of many I've fixed under less than ideal conditions." Her words were simple, but there was an unmistakable weight behind them, the weight of lived experience, of training that had burned her body and mind to steel. Sandoval raised his eyebrows. "Worse?" he asked, his voice incredulous. "Corporal, you just fixed a jammed minigun under fire, while the battlefield was alive with incoming rounds, and you're calling that just another jam?" Riley allowed herself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Perspective," she said simply. "You get used to it when survival isn't optional." She adjusted her gloves, brushing dust from her sleeves, and straightened fully, standing with the same calm authority that had carried her through the battle. Sandoval took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You're not telling me everything. That tattoo. You're a SEAL?" The word hung in the air, heavy with disbelief and admiration. Riley's eyes met his directly. For a brief moment, there was no deflection, no camouflage, no casual brush-off, just recognition of truth. "Yes," she replied finally, her voice steady. "I went through the program a few years ago. Hell Week, SEAL training, all in it. I've been in missions most people would consider impossible. This," she gestured subtly to the Apache, the battlefield, and the surrounding chaos, "isn't the first time I've been in a fight like this. And it won't be the last." Sandoval's mouth went dry. He had expected skill, yes. He had expected competence. But he hadn't expected to meet someone who had survived and thrived in a world so few had ever witnessed. He wanted to ask questions, to know every mission, every detail, every trial, but something in Riley's posture stopped him. She had revealed enough. She didn't need to prove anything further. Her presence, her actions, and her tattoo had already spoken volumes. The soldiers around them began to relax slightly, their attention drawn to the aftermath of the battle, the dust settling, the air clearing. But Sandoval stayed close to Riley, almost unwilling to let the moment pass. He had seen her skill, her courage, her precision, and he knew that trust between them had been forged in the crucible of battle. This silent bond, tempered by recognition and mutual understanding, was something few would ever experience. "I need to know," he said finally, breaking the silence that had grown between them. "How many others know what you're capable of? How many know your full story?" Riley's gaze softened slightly, though her eyes remained sharp. "Very few," she admitted. "Most don't need to know. I do what's necessary, and the rest stays in the shadows. Lives depend on focus, not recognition." She paused briefly, scanning the surrounding terrain with the same vigilance she had maintained throughout the battle. "What matters is that the job gets done." "That's it," Sandoval nodded slowly, absorbing her words. There was humility in her admission, but it didn't diminish the awe he felt. If anything, it amplified it. Here was someone who had achieved mastery, not for acclaim, not for praise, but for purpose. Her SEAL background, her calm under fire, and her unshakable competence had just saved lives and turned the tide of battle. A brief silence fell between them, filled only by the settling dust and distant echoes of gunfire. In that silence, a profound respect solidified. Sandoval understood the rare privilege of witnessing someone of Riley's caliber in action, of seeing both her skill and her character displayed without pretense or ego. It was a moment that would remain etched in his memory forever. Finally, Riley packed the last of her tools, slinging the kit over her shoulder with effortless efficiency. "The Apache's ready for extraction and patrol," she said. "The soldiers on the ground have cover, and the enemy has been pushed back for now. My work here is done at least for this mission." Her tone was matter-of-fact, yet it carried the weight of command, of someone who had lived through far worse and understood the stakes intimately. Sandoval extended a hand, not just as a pilot to a mechanic, but as a fellow warrior recognizing a peer of extraordinary skill. "Corporal Quinn," he said, his voice steady but filled with respect. "I don't think you understand how many lives you just saved. And what you are. Not many get to see what I just saw today. Not many." Riley shook his hand briefly, a firm and confident grip, her eyes meeting his with quiet acknowledgement. "I don't do it for recognition," she said again. "I do it because it needs to be done." Her calm authority left no room for argument, but Sandoval knew that her words carried the weight of truth, tempered by the extraordinary skill she had demonstrated. As they both looked out over the battlefield, the soldiers regrouping and moving under the protection of the restored Apache, the moment felt monumental. Not for fanfare, not for awards, but because it marked the quiet emergence of a legend. Riley Quinn's skill, courage, and history had been revealed not to the world at large, but to someone who could recognize its true value. And that recognition, in its own way, was powerful enough. The dust finally began to settle over the hot zone, the sharp edges of chaos softened by the quiet hum of the Apache, now patrolling overhead. Soldiers moved cautiously, regrouping behind sandbags and rocky outcroppings, their confidence renewed by the restored firepower and the silent authority of the woman who had just saved them. Riley Quinn stood near the helicopter, breathing steady, her gaze sweeping the ridges one last time to ensure no enemy threat remained. Sweat and grime streaked her face, evidence of the ordeal, yet her composure was unbroken. Captain Eric Sandoval approached her again, slower this time, as if reluctant to disturb the calm she radiated. His eyes were wide with respect, lingering on the SEAL trident that glinted faintly beneath her rolled sleeve. "Corporal," he said, voice steady but reverent, "I can't stop thinking about what I just witnessed. Not many people could have done what you did today, and fewer still with that level of calm." Riley gave a faint nod, accepting the acknowledgement but not dwelling on it. "It's part of the job," she said. Her tone was simple, almost casual, but there was a weight behind it, the weight of countless missions, countless lives dependent on skill and focus rather than recognition. She knew the soldiers would remember her actions, the pilot would remember her skill, but she had never sought fame. She did what was necessary, and that was enough. Sandoval's gaze lingered on her, trying to reconcile the quiet humility with the extraordinary capability he had witnessed. "You're more than just a mechanic, Quinn. That tattoo. Your training? It explains everything. But I can't believe how seamlessly you handled all of it under fire." His voice softened, almost reflective. "You've saved lives today. Not in theory, not by accident. You've saved them with skill, precision, and instinct. And with courage I don't think most people will ever understand." Riley allowed herself a small smile, just enough to acknowledge the weight of his words. "Courage isn't a choice," she said softly. "It's what you do when there's no other option. You either act or you fail. Today, I acted." Her eyes flicked toward the soldiers regrouping below, toward the ridgelines now clear of immediate threats. "That's all that matters." Sandoval nodded slowly, respect deepening in his eyes. He had flown with countless soldiers, witnessed acts of bravery, and endured chaos that would break most men, but Riley's actions were something else entirely. She had combined mechanical expertise, combat training, and battlefield intuition into a single decisive act that had turned the tide. Few could claim that level of mastery, and fewer still did so under live fire. For a brief moment, they stood in silence, observing the battlefield as it shifted from chaos to controlled stability. The soldiers below moved with renewed confidence, emboldened by the lethal assurance of the Apache and the quiet authority of the woman who had restored it. The enemy had been pushed back, at least for now, their suppression demonstrating Riley's skill and the subtle tactical advantage she had orchestrated with minimal fanfare. Sandoval finally broke the silence, stepping closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I want you to know, not many of us get the chance to see what you're capable of. I saw it today, and it's beyond words." There was an unspoken awe in his tone, a mixture of respect, disbelief, and recognition that went far beyond professional courtesy. Riley met his gaze steadily. "I don't do it for recognition," she replied. "I do it because it needs to be done. That's always been enough for me." Her voice was calm, confident, and unyielding. She had spent years in training, missions, and impossible situations that demanded more than recognition. They demanded results. Today had been no different. Sandoval nodded, understanding. In that moment, he recognized that her humility was not weakness, but a reflection of true strength. She had mastered fear, chaos, and machinery alike, and had done so without needing the applause of those around her. Her power lay in action, not words, in skill, not showmanship. The helicopter's rotors hummed softly, a steady presence above the settling battlefield. Soldiers began to organize for extraction, their movements confident, efficient, and orderly. Riley checked the Apache one last time, ensuring the minigun was ready, that the aircraft systems were stable, and that the soldiers below had cover. Her vigilance remained unwavering, a testament to the discipline honed through years of SEAL training and battlefield experience. Sandoval stepped beside her as she finished her final check. "Do you ever stop?" he asked quietly, a faint trace of incredulity in his voice. "After all of this? After all you've endured, do you ever get to rest?" Riley glanced at him, a small, almost imperceptible smirk tugging at her lips. "Rest is a luxury," she said simply. "We do what's necessary, and we prepare for the next moment. That's life in the field." Her words were matter-of-fact, yet they carried a profound understanding of survival, endurance, and purpose. Sandoval shook his head, a mixture of admiration and disbelief crossing his face. "I've flown through firefights, witnessed acts of bravery, and seen soldiers survive situations that should have killed them. But today, you changed my understanding of what's possible." His eyes flicked briefly to the tattoo, Then back to Riley. "I won't forget this. I won't forget you." Riley's expression softened slightly, though her eyes remained sharp. "You won't," she said simply. "Just remember that it's not about me. It's about the mission, the team, and the lives that need protecting. Today, we did that. That's the only story that matters." For a moment, Sandoval allowed himself to fully absorb the magnitude of her words, the depth of her skill, and the quiet authority she carried without seeking accolades. He realized that some heroes did not need recognition. Their actions were proof enough. Riley Quinn had not only restored a weapon and turned the tide of battle, she had reminded everyone who witnessed her of the true meaning of courage, discipline, and mastery. As the soldiers moved to their extraction points, Riley prepared to board the Apache for patrol and continued support. Her movements were calm, deliberate, and confident, a reflection of both her experience and her unwavering focus on the mission at hand. Sandoval watched her, understanding that this was someone whose legacy would extend far beyond a single battlefield. She was a living testament to skill, courage, and quiet heroism. Before boarding, Riley turned slightly toward him, offering a small nod. "Stay sharp, Captain. The mission isn't over yet. The enemy may regroup, and we'll need every advantage." Her voice carried authority, calm, and a subtle command that left no room for hesitation. Sandoval nodded in acknowledgement, feeling a rare mixture of relief, respect, and awe. "Understood," he said simply. He knew that today he had witnessed something extraordinary, a living legend, a warrior whose skill, discipline, and courage had saved lives and commanded respect without ever seeking it. The Apache lifted off, Riley securing herself and scanning the horizon, eyes sharp for any sign of movement. The soldiers on the ground moved confidently toward safety, emboldened by the restored firepower above and inspired by the quiet authority of the woman who had orchestrated the entire effort. As the helicopter ascended and the dust settled further, Sandoval allowed himself a final glance at Riley. She was more than a mechanic, more than a soldier. She was a symbol of resilience, skill, and unwavering commitment. The battlefield, once chaotic and uncertain, had been transformed by her presence. And though few would ever know the full extent of her heroism, those who did, Sandoval and the soldiers she had protected, would carry the memory with them forever. Riley Quinn's name would not appear in headlines or awards lists, but her legend was already cemented in the minds of those who had seen her in action. Quiet, lethal, and unshakable, she had reminded everyone that true heroes did not seek recognition. They acted because it was necessary, and in doing so, they changed the world, one life at a time. The Apache roared into the sky, its minigun primed and ready, as Riley scanned the horizon with unflinching focus. The battle had been won for now, but she was already preparing for the next challenge, the next mission, the next moment where skill, courage, and instinct would decide life or death. And somewhere above the battlefield, Captain Sandoval followed, forever changed by the woman who had shown him the true meaning of mastery under fire. In the swirling dust of the hot zone, one truth remained. Legends were not created by words or fame. They were forged in moments like this, when calm, mastery, skill, and courage collided in perfect harmony. And Riley Quinn had just written her name into history.